guy I like confessed to me. I rejected him so he would insist, but he didn't. Why are men nowadays such princesses? I've spent the last 6 months completely redesigning my persona to align with the feminine mystery and high-value woman archetypes I see on my social media feeds every morning. I wasn't just looking for any guy. I was looking for a man who understood the dance. Someone who knew that a woman's worth is measured by the height of the walls he has to climb. When I met Liam, a guy who seemed to have his life together and actually possessed a spine, I thought I'd finally found a worthy opponent for the games I'd been perfected. We went on 5 dates, each one carefully curated by me to ensure I remained an enigma, never revealing too much and always staying just out of reach. I followed the scripts to a T, making sure I was the ultimate prize he had to earn. The connection between us was undeniable, or at least it was from my side of the chessboard. Liam was attentive, funny, and had this way of looking at me that made me feel like I was the only person in the room, which is exactly how it should be. However, being a high-value woman means you don't just settle for nice or attentive. You have to test the foundations of his interest to see if it's made of steel or straw. I was waiting for the perfect moment to deploy the standard barrier test, a maneuver designed to separate the true hunters from the mere pretenders. I needed to know if he would actually fight for me when things got difficult. Last night, after a beautiful dinner at a place I'd subtly suggested because of its lighting, Liam finally sat me down and got serious. He looked me in the eyes, took a deep breath, and told me he had caught real feelings for me and wanted us to be exclusive. This was the moment I'd been preparing for, the climax of the first chapter where I was supposed to provide the first major obstacle. A yes. On a silver platter is for basic girls who are afraid of being alone, not for someone like me. I knew that if he truly wanted me, a little rejection would only fan the flames of his desire. I looked him dead in the eye, maintaining my perfectly practiced neutral expression, and delivered the line. I told him I was flattered, but I just wasn't looking for anything serious right now because I value my independence far too much. I expected him to shift into high gear, to tell me how he'd change my mind or how he was willing to wait. I was practically vibrating with anticipation for the "let me prove I'm worth it" monologue that every coach promises will follow. It was his chance to show some backbone, to prove that he wasn't just another guy who gives up when the going gets tough. Instead of the passionate plea I deserved, Liam just blinked at me a few times as if he were processing a data error. He let out a slow, steady nod and told me he respected my decision completely. He said he didn't want to waste my time or his if we were on different pages regarding our futures. Before I could even process the lack of effort, he signaled the waiter, paid the entire bill without a word of protest, and stood up to leave. He wished me good luck with everything as if I were a business acquaintance he'd just finished a meeting with. I sat there in the silence of the restaurant, waiting for my phone to buzz with a "I can't let you go" that text, but it never came. He didn't even text to see if I got home safe, which is the absolute bare minimum for a gentleman regardless of the status of the relationship. I am honestly disgusted by the lack of hunter instinct in men today. It's like they've all become fragile. Little princesses who can't handle a single no. I was literally doing him a favor by giving him a chance to show his backbone, and he just folded like a wet napkin. It's pathetic how quickly they give up on something that was supposed to be real feelings. I keep replaying the scene in my head, looking for where he might have misinterpreted my very clear signals. He should have known that a woman like me doesn't just say yes immediately to such a heavy proposal. It's basic psychology. You value what you have to work for, and I was giving him the work. But instead of working, he just checked out, proving that his feelings were probably superficial to begin with. If he had actually cared, he would have seen through the independence talk and realized it was a cry for him to step up. Now I'm stuck wondering if the dating pool is just filled with these low-effort men who expect everything to be easy. Where are the alphas who take what they want and don't let a little thing like boundaries or rejection stop them? I followed the rules of the high-value woman handbook, and yet I'm the one sitting here alone while he's probably already forgotten my name. It feels like a personal insult to my intelligence and my beauty that he didn't even try to change my mind. My time is valuable, and I feel like I've wasted months on someone who didn't have the stomach for a real chase. The more I think about it, the more I realize that Liam's reaction was actually a massive red flag. A man who respects a no that easily is a man who isn't willing to lead or protect his woman. He basically told me that I wasn't worth the effort of a 5-minute argument, which is incredibly dehumanizing. I was offering him the chance of a lifetime and he treated it like a casual not interested on a dating app. It's a sad state of affairs when women have to lower their standards just to keep a man from running away. I'm currently debating whether I should even bother explaining to him what he did wrong. Part of me wants to show him how much he failed, but the other part knows he's probably too fragile to hear the truth. He'll probably just twist it around and make it seem like I was the one playing games when I was just being a high-value woman. Men these days have zero emotional intelligence and even less romantic ambition. I'm better off without someone who lacks the basic instinct to pursue the woman he claims to love. Main story comments. Anonymous user 1 says, so you literally told him, no, I don't want this. And now you're mad that he listened? You won the Independence Prize you asked for, yet you're complaining about being alone. Oops, reply, you clearly don't understand how high-value dynamics work. A real man knows that a no during a confession is a masculinity check to see if he's actually committed. He failed the most basic test of character. Anonymous user 2 says, why exactly are you fuming? You said you didn't want anything serious and he respected that boundary. Isn't that what everyone asks for nowadays? Oops, reply, real men are supposed to read between the lines and recognize when a woman is testing their investment. If he can't see the yes hidden behind the no, he's not an alpha, he's just a quitter. Update 1. It's been 3 days since my last update, and the silence from Liam's side is becoming a loud declaration of his incompetence. I decided to take the high road and give him a few opportunities to realize what he's missing by subtly occupying his digital space. I started posting a series of high-value quotes on my Instagram stories about how a queen never chases, accompanied by a photo of a massive bouquet of lilies I bought for myself. I made sure the lighting was perfect, so it looked like an anonymous gift, giving him the perfect opening to feel a pang of jealousy. I waited for his name to pop up in my viewers list, which it did, but he didn't send a single DM or even a heart reaction. The absolute audacity of this man continued when I saw him tagged in a photo at a local sports bar that same evening. He was surrounded by his friends, laughing and looking entirely too comfortable for someone who was supposedly in love 72 hours ago. It was a slap in the face to see him enjoying a burger and a beer while I was sitting at home maintaining my standards and waiting for his inevitable apology. It's clear now that his feelings were a total fabrication, just a way to try and get an easy win without having to do the work. If he actually had any emotional depth, he'd be miserable right now, reflecting on his failure to secure a woman of my caliber. Since he clearly lacks the emotional intelligence to reach out on his own, I decided to send what my coach calls a clutter text. I sent him a message asking if he'd accidentally picked up my designer silk scarf during our last date. A scarf I currently have folded neatly in my top drawer. I figured this would give him a low-pressure opening to apologize for giving up so easily, and perhaps suggest a time to return it so we could talk. It was a bridge I was building for him. A way for him to save face while showing he still cared enough to look for my belongings. I was practically doing his job for him at this point. He replied 2 hours later with a message that was so dry it could have started a wildfire. He said he had checked his car and his apartment and that it wasn't there, then suggested I check my own laundry. He ended the text with "take care," which is the universal sign for I am done with this conversation forever. No emojis, no I miss you, and certainly no let's grab a drink and discuss why I was so weak the other night. The lack of effort is actually insulting to the time we spent together. I am honestly baffled by how he can be so dismissive after everything I did to cultivate our connection. I gave him the blueprint for a high-value relationship and he just threw it in the trash because he didn't want to put in the overtime. It's not just about a scarf, it's about the fact that he didn't even use the opportunity to check in on me. A man who truly values a woman will use any excuse to talk to her, especially after a misunderstanding like our last date. His response just confirms that he's part of this new generation of princess who expect women to do all the emotional heavy lifting. I spent the rest of the night scrolling through my high-value group chats, and everyone agreed that his behavior is a classic sign of a low-investment male. They reminded me that I shouldn't be the one chasing him, but it's hard not to feel indignant when your carefully crafted maneuvers are met with such blunt indifference. I'm starting to think he might have some sort of ego problem that prevents him from admitting he was wrong. It's much easier for him to act like he doesn't care than to admit he folded under pressure. I'm essentially being punished for having standards. The scarf trick was supposed to be a test of integrity as well, and he failed that too by not even pretending to care about my missing property. If I had lost something valuable of his, I would have been frantic to help him find it. But he just gave me a check your laundry and moved on with his day. It shows a complete lack of protective instinct, which is a foundational requirement for any man I date. I'm disgusted by how quickly the chivalry he displayed on our first few dates evaporated the moment things got real. I've decided that I'm going to stop giving him these easy irons and start being even more distant. If he wants a queen, he's going to have to find a way to get past the Iron Curtain. I'm building around my heart. I won't be checking his stories anymore, and I certainly won't be asking about any more fictional lost items. He needs to feel the full weight of my absence if he's ever going to learn his lesson. It's for his own good, really, as he needs to learn how to be a man before he tries to date someone like me again. However, the fact that he was out laughing at a bar still grates on my nerves. How can someone be so heartless? It makes me think that maybe he was never actually into me, and the confession was just a script he was following to get what he wanted. When it didn't work immediately, he just moved on to the next target. That's the only logical explanation for why a man would just walk away from a woman like me without a fight. I'm going to stay the course and keep my standards high, even if it means dealing with this temporary annoyance. I know my value, and I know that eventually a man will come along who understands that no is just the beginning of the negotiation. Until then, Liam can enjoy his cheap beer and his low-effort life. He had a diamond and he treated it like a pebble, so he deserves whatever mediocre future he finds for himself. I'm just glad I found out how fragile he was before I wasted any more of my prime years on him. Update 1 comments. Anonymous user 1 says the lost scarf trick? Really? That's the oldest, most transparent move in the book, and he clearly saw right through it. You're not a queen. You're just a girl playing games with a guy who has better things to do. Op's reply, it wasn't just a trick. It was a test of integrity to see if he'd go out of his way to help me with a problem. Failed that test miserably, proving he doesn't have a protective bone in his body. Anonymous user 2 says, I bought flowers for myself, giving real Miley Cyrus vibes, but way more pathetic. Because you're doing it to bait an ex. If you're so independent, why are you stalking his tags and begging for a reaction? OP's reply, it's called standard maintenance. A woman of my level should always be surrounded by beauty, and if a man isn't providing it, I'll show him exactly what he's failing to contribute. Update 2. It's been a week since my last update, and the situation has taken a turn for the absurd. My relationship coach released a new video about provoking the lion, explaining that sometimes a man needs a visceral reminder of what he's losing to jump-start his pursuit drive. I decided to take this advice and, accidentally, post a story of a beautiful wine glass at a candlelit dinner, making sure to include a man's hand in the frame. The hand actually belonged to my cousin, who was visiting from out of town, but the camera didn't need to know that. I wanted Liam to see that while he was being independent and respectful, other men were more than willing to step into the void he left behind. Liam actually viewed the story within 20 minutes of me posting it, which gave me a temporary rush of satisfaction. I sat by my phone, waiting for the, "Who is he?" text, or the, "I can't believe you're moving on so fast" phone call. I was prepared with a perfectly dismissive response that would make him work even harder to win back my favor. But instead of the jealous confrontation I expected, I noticed something that made my blood boil. Liam unfollowed me. He didn't just ignore the story. He actively removed me from his digital life as if I were some kind of toxic ex instead of the woman he was supposedly in love with. I was absolutely fuming at the sheer immaturity of his reaction. How can a grown man be this princess-like and sensitive over a simple photo? It's a total lack of alpha energy to just run away the moment you see a little bit of competition. If he had any real interest, he would have fought for his place, not deleted my profile like a hurt teenager. I realized then that I couldn't let him get away with such a disrespectful move without calling him out on it. I needed him to understand that his behavior was beneath a man of his age. I ended up calling him just once, strictly to address his lack of maturity. When he finally picked up, he sounded incredibly bored, which was even more insulting than if he had been angry. I told him straight up that unfollowing me was a petty, low-vibration move, and that I was just trying to gauge his level of investment in us. I told him that if he couldn't handle the sight of me living my life, he was never strong enough to be with me in the first place. I expected him to stutter or try to defend himself, but he just sighed. He told me, "Tiffany, you told me you didn't want anything serious, and now you're seeing other people. That's fine, but I'm not interested in being a spectator. Enjoy your date." Before I could even begin to explain the complex psychology behind my move or tell him that the hand belonged to my cousin, he hung up on me. He didn't even give me the chance to finish my sentence. It's like he's intentionally trying to be as difficult and uncooperative as possible just to spite me for having high standards. I spent the next hour pacing my apartment, trying to wrap my head around his spectator comment. It's so typical of men these days to play the victim when a woman exerts her power. He's acting like I was hurting him on purpose when I was actually giving him a golden opportunity to prove his worth. A real man doesn't get bored or unfollow when he sees the woman he wants with someone else. He steps up his game. Liam's reaction was just a cowardly escape from the reality of the situation. My coach says that this is a common reaction for men who have low testosterone energy. They can't handle the pressure of a high-value woman, so they retreat into their shells and act like they're done. But I know that deep down, he's probably hurting and just doesn't know how to express it without losing his ego. He's trying to punish me with silence because he knows he can't compete with the standard I've set. It's honestly kind of sad to see a man fold so completely under the slightest bit of tension. I've decided that I'm not going to let this slide. I'm going to continue my social experiment to see just how far he'll go to protect his fragile ego. If he wants to unfollow me, fine, but I know he's still looking. People like him always find a way to keep tabs on the ones they lost. I'll make sure my life looks so incredible that he'll have no choice but to realize his mistake. He thinks he's being refreshingly direct, but he's really just being a quitter. It's frustrating because I really did see potential in him, but his refusal to play the game is a major turnoff. You can't have a high-stakes romance without a little bit of drama and a lot of testing. That's how you build a bond that lasts. If he just wanted something easy, he should have gone for one of those girls who replies to texts within 5 seconds and has no life of her own. I'm a project, a masterpiece, and he clearly doesn't have the artistic vision to see it through. I'm going to focus on myself for a while, but I'm keeping his number unblocked for now. I want to be available for the moment he finally breaks and realizes that he's lost the best thing that ever happened to him. When he comes crawling back, and they always do, I'll be ready with a whole new set of tests to ensure he's learned his lesson. He needs to understand that you don't just unfollow a queen and expect to get back into the castle without a significant tribute. Update 2 comments. Anonymous user 1 says, Alpha energy? Low testosterone. Lady, as a guy, I can tell you that the moment we see a girl posting mystery man photos to make us jealous, we're out. It's not being a princess, it's called having self-respect and not wanting to deal with a circus. Ops replies, spoken like a man who also has low testosterone energy. If you're intimidated by a little competition, you weren't in love, you were just looking for a low-effort placeholder. Real men fight for their territory. Anonymous user 2 says, did you really use your cousin's hand for a jealousy trap? That is next-level delusional. Imagine your cousin finding out he was the prop in your failed attempt to manipulate a guy who already rejected your games. OP's reply, it was a valid social experiment to gauge his investment. The fact that he reacted so dramatically proves that he's emotionally unstable and couldn't handle the reality of a high-value woman having options. Update 3. It's been 2 weeks since my last update, and the boomerang of reality finally hit me square in the face. Though I still maintain that the situation is fundamentally unfair. I decided to head to our usual coffee spot, the one with the expensive artisanal beans, hoping to coincidentally run into Liam and show him exactly what he's been missing. I spent an hour on my makeup, achieving that no makeup look that actually takes forever, and wore an outfit that screamed unbothered and expensive. I did run into him, but the scene was nothing like the cinematic reconciliation I had scripted in my mind. Liam was sitting at a corner table with a girl who looked like she didn't even know what a magnetic gaze or a feminine essence was. She had zero makeup on, her hair was in a messy bun, and she was wearing an oversized baggy hoodie that completely hid her silhouette. They were laughing together, and not that polite first date laugh, but a deep, genuine sound that filled the room. She looked like a child, honestly, just giggling at something he said while he looked at her with an expression I hadn't seen since our third date. I felt a surge of indignation. How could he go from someone like me to that? I decided to be the bigger person and walk up to them, purely to offer a closure that he clearly hadn't been able to find on his own. I stood over their table and said, "Oh, Liam, I see you moved on fast. I guess my test was just a little too much for you to handle." I wanted him to feel the weight of his failure in front of his new friend. I wanted her to know that she was just a consolation prize for a man who couldn't cut it in the big leagues. I waited for him to look guilty or ashamed, but he just looked genuinely confused. He tilted his head and asked, "What test, Tiffany?" So I told him. I explained the entire philosophy of the high-value woman, how a woman of my caliber requires a man who doesn't take no for an answer, and how his quick retreat proved he lacked the necessary stamina. I told him that my rejection was a gift, a chance for him to prove his devotion. The girl he was with actually laughed out loud, a sharp, mocking sound that made me want to scream. She didn't even have the grace to be intimidated by my presence. Liam didn't get angry, which was the worst part. He just looked at me with this pitying expression that felt like a slap. He told me, "Tiffany, I'm an adult. If a woman tells me no, I believe her. I don't have the time or the energy to solve riddles just for a chance to date someone who plays with my head." He spoke to me like I was a confused child rather than a superior woman. Then he introduced the girl as his new girlfriend, Sarah. He'd known her for years, apparently, and he said she is refreshingly direct. The irony of the situation is almost too much to bear. My own logic of playing hard to get literally opened the door for him to run straight to the one person who doesn't play games. He's choosing a life of mediocrity and directness because he's too lazy to handle the complexity of a real woman. It's a classic case of a man settling for less because the best was too much work. He'd rather be with someone who wears hoodies and doesn't test him than someone who would have pushed him to be his absolute best. I stood there for a moment, waiting for some kind of realization to dawn on him, but they just went back to their conversation as if I had already disappeared. Sarah didn't even look at me again. She just took a sip of her coffee and smiled at him. I walked out of that coffee shop feeling like the world had gone mad. How can being direct be a virtue when it just means being boring and predictable? It's like the entire dating market has been downgraded to the lowest common denominator. I'm currently sitting in my car trying to process how I became the villain in a story where I was the only one following the rules. I followed every high-value tip, used every standard, and yet I'm the one who is single while he's with someone who looks like she rolled out of bed 5 minutes ago. It feels like a glitch in the universe. My standards are supposed to attract a king, not drive him into the arms of a commoner. It's deeply insulting that he thinks he found something better just because it's easier. I'm starting to think that maybe men like Liam are the reason the world is in the state it's in. They want the rewards without the struggle. They want the woman without the chase. If everyone just said what they meant all the time, there would be no mystery, no passion, and no romance. I was trying to give him a story worth telling, and he chose a pamphlet instead. He's the one who lost out, even if it doesn't feel like it right now while I'm staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I'm going to go home and delete his number for real this time. There's no point in keeping a line open for a man who is clearly satisfied with a refreshingly direct existence. I'm a high-value woman, and if the world isn't ready for my standards, then that's the world's problem, not mine. I'll keep searching for a man who has the courage to climb the walls I've built because I refuse to lower them for anyone, especially not for a prince-so who prefers hoodies to high heels. Update 3 comments. Anonymous user 1 says the refreshingly direct girl won because she's sane and doesn't treat people like lab rats. You literally chased him to a coffee shop just to tell him you were playing games, and you're surprised he prefers the girl who just treats him like a person? Ops reply, she's not sane, she's just a placeholder for his ego. He chose her because she doesn't challenge him to be better. It's easy to be direct when you have nothing of value to protect or hide. Anonymous user 2 says, woman of my caliber? High caliber, but you're currently crying in a car while the baggy hoodie girl is actually happy with the guy you want. The math isn't math in Tiffany. Maybe the caliber is the problem. Ops reply, the world simply isn't ready for women who have actual standards and know their worth. I'm a martyr for the cause of high-value dating, and I'd rather be single and correct than happy and basic like her. Update 4. It's been 2 months since my last update, and the silence in my apartment has become a permanent resident. I stopped following that specific relationship coach not because her advice was wrong, but because I found a new one who specializes in attachment theory. According to him, Liam is actually a classic dismissive avoidant who uses directness as a shield to avoid true emotional intimacy. It's a comfort to know that I actually dodged a bullet. His inability to engage with my tests was just a symptom of his deep-seated fear of being truly known by a high-value woman. Still, knowing I'm right, that doesn't make the weekends any less quiet. My social circle has shrunk considerably lately, which I attribute to my friends' lack of commitment to self-improvement. They've stopped inviting me out to our usual spots, claiming that I analyze everyone to death and that I make every conversation about dynamics and value. They just don't understand that I'm trying to help them see the truth of their own mediocre relationships. It's lonely at the top, I suppose, but I didn't expect the view to be this desolate. I spend most of my time now perfecting my magnetic energy in front of the mirror, waiting for someone who is actually worthy of it to appear. I saw a photo of Liam and that girl, Sarah, on a mutual friend's feed last weekend. They were hiking in some dusty mountains. He looked light, in a way I don't think I ever allowed him to be when we were together. He was wearing a ridiculous sun hat and laughing at something she was doing. I spent that entire afternoon rereading my old journals, obsessively checking my notes to see exactly where I failed the maneuver. I wanted to find the logical error, the moment where the script went wrong. But the more I read, the more I realized that I treated a human heart like a software update. I kept trying to test the connection, pushing and pulling to see if it would break until I accidentally deleted the entire file. I thought I was building a castle, but I was really just digging a moat so deep that no one could ever get across it. It's a bitter realization to have while you're scrolling through a burner account just to see the life of a man you pushed away. I'm still convinced that men should lead and that a woman's no should be a challenge. But it's hard to lead someone who keeps running in the opposite direction the moment you start the chase. I tell myself every night that I kept my standards and that my dignity is worth the price of this isolation. I tell myself that Sarah's just a temporary fix for his fragile ego and that eventually he'll realize that refreshingly direct is just another word for shallow. But then I look at his photos again from the safety of my anonymous profile and I see a man who isn't being tested, but who is actually being loved. I'm still standing behind my barricades, waiting for a hunter who will never come because I've made sure the fortress is impenetrable. I'm alone, but I'm high value, and in the middle of the night, that feels like the coldest prize I've ever won.